Hi guys. I'm going to share something really significant today. Um, okay, I think I'm live. I wasn't sure if it went away for a second or not, getting kind of set up here. But I wanted to share something that has really significantly um, and really radically impacted my life. And I'm 100% positive that I'm not the only individual that's experienced this. I'm not the only person that's affected by this. I actually wanted to talk on this because I believe that the topic I'm about to um, go into and really speak about is something that affects a lot of people that are in the church. I think that it's actually a bit rampant right now in the church. I think that we're experiencing a lot of problems um, because of what I'm about to talk about. So um, it's about to get real. I'm about to share some things from my own life that are very painful. They're extremely uncomfortable to talk about, and some of this is going to be um, eye opening for some of you, and some of this is going to be uncomfortable for some of you. So, um, I'm going to start off by reading a post that a friend of mine shared, and honestly, this was something that um, kind of connected to what I've been going through and some things that I've really felt are necessary to talk about. But it's going to be kind of a preface for some things that I'm about to share from my own personal life. So the post was religionnews.com, or sorry, religionnews.com is what this post is from. Um, for those of you that are watching, this is specifically relating to sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, and kind of this over sexualization in our culture that um, creates a kind of uh, a context where women have to be treated a certain way and where men are expected to behave a certain way, and it's causing a lot of problems. It's not healthy. So the actual article says, is the evangelicals' view of sex at the root of our sex scandals? I think I'm going to try to post a link to this, but if you look up religionnews.com, you can look up sex scandals or evangelical sex scandals, and you should be able to pull up the same article that I'm going to be reading from. And then I'm going to share some things that I've personally went through, my own story, and kind of some deep frustrations that I've been trying to navigate from all of the things that I've experienced and trying to pursue the Lord and the call of God on my life as a woman, and a woman called to ministry, being basically set into a cycle of a perpetual cycle that is destructive, both for, I believe, females and males, um, and the church. So let's dive in. Okay. So this was actually published February 18th, 2021. So it's not super new, but it's new. It says evangelicals are pointing fingers at celebrity Christian culture, blaming it for the tragic Ravi Zacharias sex abuse and rape scandal and the extramarital escapades of the Hillsong pastor Carl Lentz, as well as many more. But what if this epidemic is not just or even mostly caused by celebrity culture? What if it's the evangelicals' view of sex? Now, before you get, I don't know, overly sensitive and try to create an argument, just listen. Yes, celebrity culture gave Zacharias more access to victims and gave both men cover for what they were doing, but it was not celebrity culture that taught these men to objectify women. our evangelical culture primed them for it. Take the best-selling Every Man's Battle series of books. Every Heart Restored says, because of male hardwiring, men don't naturally have to or have that Christian view of sex. Every Man's Battle says, we find another reason for the prevalence of sexual sin among men. We've got there naturally simply by being male. So they're basically saying that by being male, that men are predisposed to sin sexually. Repeatedly, God gave male sexuality and objectification of women are seen as one and the same. Tim LaHaye in The Act of Marriage echoes this. Women must cultivate the problem of visual lust, whereas men almost universally must cope with the problem just because they're men. So women cause lust and men have to deal with this problem called lust. So if men can't help it, why do these books propose? What do they propose as the solution? Women. It's a woman who must keep men from sinning. And it starts with understanding this is just how men are. For women only, quotes, a man wishing his wife would accept the struggle I have with lust, and he could reveal my weakness without being judged or accused, saying he wants to be loved for who I am, not for who she wants me to be. In response, the husband quotes the book, asks, do we want to support our husbands or to change them? Love and Respect says, if your husband feels you do not respect his struggle, his desire for you, and his maleness, pulls back from you. In one of the most degrading choices of words ever in Every Man's Battle, it tells women, once he tells you he's quitting lust, cold turkey, be like a merciful vial of methadone for him. Proving the metaphor was deliberate, the author repeats it. Your wife can be a methadone-like fix when your temperature is rising. No talk of intimacy or dignity. She's simply like a methadone fix. Since male sexuality hinges on objectification of women, the best couples can hope for, apparently, is that he objectifies only one woman. The one he's married to. By getting his fill with his sanction option, he can withstand the more alluring ones. Husbands don't stop needing methadone when wives are physically unwell either. In sheet music, Kevin Lehman says that if a wife is bleeding heavily, recovering from childbirth, or simply not feeling her best, she can help her husband with a hand job. And if he's really climbing the walls, after talking about how difficult the wife's period is on a husband trying to resist pornography, he adds that oral sex to the mix is a faithful woman, and that's her job. Faithfulness is a two-person job. Elsewhere, Lehman also warns ominously, either you will have a love affair with your husband or someone else will. Emerson Eggerichs in Love and Respect writes from the same playbook, the cold hard truth is that men are often lured into affairs because they are sexually deprived at home. And if a woman rightfully gets upset with these threats, the author gaslights their female readers, emphasizing husbands have needs they, as women, will never understand. Love and Respect says it straight. If your husband is typical, he has needs that you don't have. The Power of a Praying Wife says, for a husband, sex is pure need. His eyes, his ears, his brain, and emotions get clouded if he doesn't have that release. These books add warnings of God's condemnation too if wives deprive their husbands. Sheet music warns, if you call yourself a Christian and you're committed to being obedient to what the Bible teaches, then you'll have to learn to fulfill sexual obligations within marriage. Love and respect takes it a step further. With spiritual fear tactics, husbands particularly can come under Satan's attack when deprived of sexual release. But who is actually being deprived of sexual release? In surveys conducted with 2 researchers for the upcoming book, and this book was by the person who wrote this article, The Great Sex Rescue, we found a 43-point orgasm gap in men's favor. 92% men almost always reaching an orgasm in sexual encounter. Only 49% women do. It seems that in the average evangelical marriage, it's more likely to be the woman who's deprived. And it's the men who are not fulfilling their sexual obligation to their wives. Nevertheless, through our evangelical bestseller, the message to women comes through loud as a bullhorn. His need for sex is bigger than your need for anything else. And when women don't put out, men apparently become predators. The act of marriage describes a husband who rapes his wife when she's kicking and screaming on their wedding night as equally unhappy. As his rape victim, his needs, her needs, says he's pawing and grabbing because he needs something very badly. As one 32-year-old executive put it, I feel like a fool, like I'm begging her or even raping her. Every Heart Restored recounts a woman saying, without foreplay, he raped me, but only if that can happen if you're married. But then the author fails to clarify that, yes, rape is rape, even in marriage. Every man's battle presents masturbating in a gym parking lot at the site of one's sister-in-law sleeping as normal behavior. In the same book, a youth group volunteer who was married with 3 kids rapes a 15-year-old girl and is portrayed sympathetically since his lust overwhelmed him. When abuse scandals like Ravi Zacharias or sexual scandals like Carl Lentz's are exposed, we should stop being surprised. These men acted exactly to what evangelical resources taught them. Men need physical release so they can't control themselves without women's help. If they don't get help, they could easily become predators, and this is all predestined as God's design. I don't know if this is affecting you guys at all, but so far, does anyone feel like any of this does this make you feel weird hearing this? I'm sorry. I thought that we were given self-control. I thought that the Spirit of the Lord lives on the inside of us. So why is it so hard? Why is it okay? Why is all of this put on the woman? Just some questions. Okay, we're going to continue. Of course, the secular world has its scandal too, and lust is not invented by evangelicals. We can definitely affirm that, and I'm not going to deny that the sexual culture that we live in has not made it more difficult, that pornography is not literally banging on the back door. I'm not going to pretend that every single time that you drive down the road or that you turn on your phone or that you're, watching the news, that there's something that's, not going to vie for that attention and try to cause a trigger. But what I am going to say is that this seems to be pretty significant in affecting the way that men believe that they have to be. I think that we've catered to something that has allowed something to get out of control in the church. And that's not okay. So I'm going to keep reading. Of course, the secular world has its scandals too, and lust wasn't invented by evangelicals. But in academia, government, business, and journalism, the rhetoric promotes empowering and respecting women. In evangelicalism, the rhetoric in our bestsellers promotes women as methadone. Yes, Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein still proliferate and will likely always have frat boys leering at women on the streets. But those frat boys will hear in their college classes and later in their human resource meetings that objectification is wrong. In their churches and at their men's ministry retreats, though, they will be told objectification is just natural, an unavoidable part of being male. Too many of our resources have stolen dignity from women while demeaning men and denying men's sanctification. The result of being has been abysmal. So they're now gonna make another plug for their book, The Great Sex Rescue. I'm not making a plug. I'm just reading this article. They surveyed 20,000 predominantly Christian women to see the effect of evangelical teaching about sex in their sexual satisfaction, marital satisfaction, and the rates of sexual pain. As the results were eye-opening. We found the messages like, all men struggle with lust, and it's every man's battle. A wife's obligation is to give her husband sex when he wants it. Women should have frequent sex with their husband to keep them from watching porn. And boys will want to push girls' sexual boundaries are all widely taught and widely believed. And that's grievous because we also found these beliefs are correlated with lowering women's orgasm rates, their ability to get aroused, their trust in their husbands, their marital satisfaction, and even increasing the incidence of sexual pain. Jesus told us to look at the fruit to judge the tree, and the fruit of this tree is nasty. We want to call the evangelical church to something higher, something better, something more centered on the person and character of Jesus. Until we start talking about Jesus-centered sexual ethic rooted in mutuality and intimacy, we will continue to have these scandals on our front pages because they're reflecting what's happening in our bedrooms. In the Old Testament, we read heartbreaking stories of Hagar, used sexually by her master to bear a child, and then discarded when she became a liability. She's forced out into the desert with her son. God meets her there, and then she is given the honor of being the first one in Scripture to bestow a name upon God, the God who sees me. Whether a woman is alone in the desert, by a well in a Samaritan village, or weeping while checking her husband's browsing history, God sees her. When will evangelicalism do the same? Okay, so I'm going to talk about God seeing me right now. I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but I'm uploading it to YouTube because I just think it's rampant. And I kind of hope that it gets a lot of clicks. I kind of hope that a lot of people see it. I hope it gets shared. I hope that the message is able to get out there. So I'm going to start with the beginning. So I was raised in a Pentecostal church. I was raised the granddaughter of a minister. I was raised with loving Jesus. I got saved when I was 3. I received the baptism in the Holy Spirit when I was 4. I've been very close to the Lord my whole life. I was raised from a very early age to even know that you don't compromise sexually. I understood what my virginity was before I ever started my period. When I was 12 years old, I already understood that I was keeping my body for my husband. There were certain things that I automatically wanted to do. I had a purity ring since I was a little girl. All I ever wanted and all I've ever wanted was to be a good wife and to have babies and to, and to do ministry. I was called to the ministry when I was really young too. And I'm a missionary. So there's a lot of things at play. But basically, I was called to the ministry right around the same time that I received the baptism in the Holy Spirit. And because I was called to the ministry at the age of 4, I knew my whole life that that's what I wanted to do. So when you're called and you're a girl, you don't realize, like, that you're going to be in an uphill battle. You don't realize that there's going to be doors that are going to be open for every other guy, even guys that are not necessarily walking the walk, that the doors will open for them, but the doors will be shut for you, and that you'll have to prove and prove and prove yourself in order to be worthy of stepping through the same thing that God's already called and anointed you for. We don't need to jump there, though. What we need to do is we need to start off by sharing some of the things that I've walked through, because I think that this is really important. I will start off by saying I made a vow myself, on my own will, to keep myself for my husband, to save my virginity for my husband. For me, I realized enough about my virginity that it was special. It is special to me, something that I've treasured, because I saw it as a form of worship to God to keep it for my husband, but I also saw it as a gift. But I also was taught that sex was a dirty thing, not a gift, like that my virginity is a gift, but that sex was dirty. That was something that I was taught from a very early age. And my parents were divorced when I was 10 years old, and my mom ended up remarrying someone who was a perverted individual, and I actually experienced living in a home with someone that was addicted to pornography and made my life unsafe because of that, made me and my sister's life unsafe. We never actually were violated by him, but there was a lot of different things that were definitely forms of sexual harassment. So this is where I want to go with this. Knowing that I wanted to save myself from my husband, but also being a young teenage girl, when I was 14 years old, there was situations that were beyond my control, and a classmate molested me. He didn't rape me, but he did pretty much everything that was able to happen outside of rape. And I was living in a small town at the time. I was attending the church one of the churches that I was attending was the church that my grandfather was over. And everybody, it seemed like not necessarily everyone in that city knew me, but a lot of people knew me. I was portrayed when things became exposed. I actually was brought into the dean's office in school, and that's how everything came out. I ended up having to file a police report because the person that molested me was a gang member. And when everything was exposed, people that were in that church told their teenage daughters not to have anything to do with me because I was a whore. Because their opinion of me mattered more than whatever, their thought of whatever happened was more important than whatever actually happened. And I spoke with a family member and tried to communicate about what happened. And they, in a very self-righteous tone, told me they didn't know who to believe, because they would rather listen to gossip and talk about that than to care about my reputation or my innocence or my own personal experience. So I was basically told by the church that I had done something wrong when I had been molested. I had nowhere to turn. So that was when I was 14 years old. We can go to when I was 15 years old. And when I was 15, I was in another place. I was in another state entirely. And I loved Jesus. I actually had recently recommitted every part of my life to him. I was really just passionate in worship. When I was 15 years old, I was up at the front worshiping, and I was pulled into the office of the church in a big mega church. I'm told by women that I shouldn't be worshiping up front because it was a distraction to the men who were leading the worship, that I was causing distraction. I was also chastised for the way that I looked physically because I developed into like a bustier kind of woman. So it was my fault that I had breasts. And I was causing a distraction, and it had nothing to do with my love for Jesus. It had everything to do with these men up front not being able to lead worship well because I'm some distraction. And I never even talked to these guys. Didn't even look at them. I went on a missions trip when I was 17 years old. I was forced to wear 2 sports bras. And the tighter the better, so that it kept everything in place, because we don't want any of that moving around. When I was a young adult, there was so many points because I knew I was called. I was looking for mentoring. I was looking for opportunities to be poured into. For some reason, it's like there's not a lot of very powerful women in ministry that are like leading, and where I was at, there was no one that was pouring into me and discipling me. But there was a lot of times when I noticed that guys would get like picked up instantly. It's like, oh, you're hungry for God? Well, I'll take you and bring you under my arm. Come with me. You can follow me. And like these pastors, these young adult ministers and youth ministers, they would naturally gravitate to young men that were feeling some kind of love for Jesus. They weren't even necessarily like feeling a call of God, but they had, a penis. I don't mean to be disrespectful, I'm just trying to be real. So they had a love for God, and these guys naturally wanted to pour into them. But there wasn't anybody willing to pour into me, even though I knew I was called, and I've been called my entire life. So I experienced something that I can only explain as completely random. Like, I should put out there that I don't really have an issue with lust. I don't struggle with masturbation. I don't have any kind of issues with being a temptress, or I don't talk to married men at all in any kind of way. Like, I don't engage in any kind of inappropriateness. But sometimes when I would try to build connection, or I would want to, I would walk down the hall and try to just to interact or speak with some of these pastors, and they would literally walk without even looking at me, like I'm a scarlet letter. Like there's something wrong with me. Like I'm gonna cause them to stumble somehow. So I'm aware that all of this isn't me. Like, I'm aware it has nothing to do with me. I've been forced as a female to grow on my own. I've been forced as a female to figure out how to develop. And I'm called to the fivefold. I'm called to disciple leaders in the Middle East. I've lived in the Middle East. I'm a missionary. I've done all of the schooling and training that's necessary. But I've been forced to learn how to do this on my own. And I've been perpetually treated as if it's my fault because I was anatomically and sexually created as a woman. There's certain things that I just I just find really wrong. I find it wrong that if I was born in a different way, if I was born um, if I was born as a man, I would be in full-time ministry, paid for completely, um, all of the things that I'm supposed to be. Like it either works where you're in ministry because you're married to someone that's in ministry, like they take you as a couple, or they take you as a man. If you're not a man, it's just it's just very political and very difficult. And then there's only certain roles that women can have. And like there's some very inappropriate things that I heard in different churches that I would serve in, because I've served in a lot of different roles. Just it's been a lot more difficult as a female. There's not a lot of options and open spaces, and so um, there's been a lot of different things that have happened, but it's almost like easier for guys to want to invest in guys because like a woman is a temptation. But I'm super bothered by that, and I think that the biggest thing that's hurt me is that growing up in a home where I was treated as something that I'm not, treated unworthy, treated as if I'm like a whore, treated as if I'm inappropriate in some way. But I've never had sex. I'm 34 years old. I've never had sex. And the last time that I kissed someone, I was 15 years old. I've purposefully lived in a way to keep myself righteous and to keep myself before God. That's almost like unheard of. But when you're perpetually perceived or not even perceived, but just treated, it's more like treated like you're gonna do something wrong when you're living before God in a certain way. It comes to a point where you have to start wondering what exactly is going on in the hearts of all of these leaders, where they don't have the capacity to actually recognize when someone is called and when they're doing what they poured their entire life into serving and leading and developing themselves because of the call in their life. There comes a point when you really have to start asking, like, what is it that men believe about themselves when they're in leadership or that they're teaching others? Because I can tell you as a woman, one of the reasons why it's been hard for me, and I also have been really believing and praying for a husband, but it's been hard for me. There's been a couple of reasons that I believe I haven't gotten married yet. The first reason is that I'm not interested in being married to someone that doesn't have self-control. I want a man who's learned how to develop his relationship with God and his intimacy with God in a way where he actually is walking in surrender to the Spirit. And he's not, he's not someone that's compromised. And I mean, I'm not meaning that he didn't sin or that he doesn't occasionally have problems. I mean that I really believe that there's a lot of people that make excuses so that they can justify their bad behavior, and I'm not interested in someone like that. If I live my life before God to not do things like that, then I don't want to have to compromise my own self in that way and just be married to be married. But secondly, and I do think I should say I do think that having a former stepfather that was addicted to pornography caused me to see how incredibly uncomfortable and unsafe that feels. How awful that feels. And how much I don't want that for my life. And then secondly, I would like to say that, when you are called to ministry and you're a female, it depends on the level of ministry. Some women are called to ministry, but it's like the ministry that their husband is in. It's like they know that they're called to ministry, but it's like, oh, well, I married a pastor. I'm going to be a pastor's wife. I'm going to work in a church, and that's good. And that's good for me. And some people are called to start some things, and I'm more along the lines of an evangelist, not a typical evangelist. I shouldn't say that. I'm more like prophetic and apostolic in my gifts, but I'm someone that's called to stir things up, called to plant things and to develop things. And there's a lot of things that I know I'm supposed to do, and a lot of it involves the Middle East, but every single ministry that I've been a part of has been kind of helping them to build and develop what they're carrying. And I know that I'm called to plant a ministry school, and I'm called to raise up leaders, and I'm called to disciple nations, and I'm called to help people to realize what they carry, and to step into that, and to bring the fires of revival, to awaken them into what they're called to in their spirit. And so there's a good bit of things that I know I'm called to do that not a lot of people really are excited to do. I've met a lot of men that are afraid to step out of their own country. I've met a lot of men that are very comfortable with corporate America. I've learned how to live surrendered to the Lord. I've learned how to live without any steady income, and God providing and opening doors. And that's not easy for everybody to do. And if you're not called to that, then you're not called to that. But as a woman, I've been in this culture and in Christian circles. I've been pushed to the side because of my genetic makeup, because of the fact that I haven't been nurtured, and I haven't been raised up the way that I know I deserved, because there wasn't room, because there wasn't people that were equipped as females. I haven't met many females. I know some, but they're very famous, and I don't know if they would ever be interested in taking time to bring me under their wing, but there's not a lot of women that are fully equipped to walk in what I know I'm called to do. And there's not been men willing to invest in and take me under their wing and pour into me the way that I need, because of this cycle, of this like perpetual cycle of just really only being willing to invest in men, and being afraid of investing in someone because it's like they don't have self-control, or they're afraid of something, they're afraid of themselves. I don't know. It's really sad, honestly. It's really sad. Because my body parts are not really something that should be a factor when you're considering calling. It really shouldn't be. My sex, my gender, shouldn't really be a factor. It should just be like me as a woman of God. Not me as a woman with breasts and a vagina. But me as someone who's called by God to change the world. That should be a factor. That should be what matters. But I will say that, like, it's been really hard because I haven't felt comfortable, because there's not been a lot of men that I've been able to find that really are passionate to go after the things that I'm burning for. And so that makes things really hard too. So I've literally been, I've been put on the side, and I've been, in a lot of ways, kind of forced to figure things out on my own, and a call that I am called to the ends of the earth, literally to the Middle East, as a single female who's lived before God righteously and chaste, who deserves every bit to have a husband, deserves every bit to be championed by leaders, who deserves every bit to be raised up and celebrated, every bit, and deserves to be recognized for righteousness and purity. And that's real. And I kind of do have a bit of an attitude right now. But I really, more than anything, want people to understand that there's a sickness that has been pervasive in the church. And I really think that post that I read hit the nail on the head when they said that we've got a big problem. They really pointed things out well. We have in our sexual culture, in our public culture, in the culture that we live in the human resources department, if someone does something to objectify a woman because she's a woman, they do something like that, then they get in trouble. It's not accepted. A man can't just, in an office, go and, either refuse to deal with another woman because she's, he can't say, oh, I'm not gonna, help her with what she's supposed to do in her job because she's a woman, and I would rather work with only people with penises because I don't feel capable of controlling myself. I don't think I can control myself. So they can, in a workplace environment, that's not okay. It's not acceptable. But in the church, it's been justified. It's been excused. It's not okay. It really needs to stop. I think that we live in a culture where we haven't had a lot of fathers that have shown us what things should really be like, and that's sad. But this is something that does need to change. I'm not a feminist. I'm not on this bandwagon with Me Too. All I'm saying is that this is really not okay. The fact that I can live purely and not be struggling, not even have lust, not have lustful thoughts, not be battling with that, not be doing anything, and it somehow be my fault that leaders have problems with lust. It's my fault that they can't invest in me, even though I know I'm called. It's my fault that when they're worshiping, they're distracted. It's my fault when I get molested. It's my fault. I don't think so. Just some food for thought. I would really love if people would share. I think it's important. I think that this kind of message needs to get out, and I think that there's a lot more women who've went through a lot more things. You know, I forgot to mention this. Part of the reason I didn't mention this. Part of the reason that I'm not married as well is I can't marry someone that just thinks that they need to control me because I have a vagina. Because I have a call in my life. Because I do have things that God wants me to do. And just because God made me a woman doesn't mean that he made me less. It doesn't mean that he made me weak. It doesn't mean that he made me incapable of some things somehow. It doesn't mean that I'm not fit to lead. It doesn't mean that I'm not fit to lead men. It doesn't mean that I'm not capable of these things. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is that, like, there are some people, what I'm basically getting at is that there are some people that they believe that all a woman is good for is sex. And making sure that the man doesn't fall, making sure that the man doesn't do things. Well, what if God is raising up powerful women too? What if I need a man to actually help champion who I am called to be too? And I'm not going to get married to someone that feels that what they're called to do is, or not even called, but that their life is just, more important than whatever God's put inside of me to do. I'm not gonna throw things away. But I do deserve a good husband. And I also do deserve good leaders. Good leaders that can invest in me and help me to step into who I'm called to be. So, for the future generations, for the upcoming women of God, upcoming Deborahs, upcoming Esthers, and all kinds of other powerful kinds of women, upcoming Aquilas, because she was an apostle, and other women in the Bible that you don't ever hear anything about. For those kind of women, we really owe it to figure our stuff out. We really owe it, men, to get more self-control, to surrender lustful stuff to Jesus. If you're a leader and you're sitting there freaking out about, oh my gosh, what if I close the door and I can't control myself with this person in front of me? Maybe she's not really interested in your sexual desires. Maybe she's there because she has a call in her life. Maybe it's you that needs to get a grasp on your sexual lusts. Maybe it's not her responsibility at all. It's just what I'm saying. So anyway, I'm trying to say this all in love. I hope it didn't come across brutal. I hope it didn't come across rude. But it did come across sincerely. So anyway, that's it. I'm signing off.